Now 12:30, it's time to call the meeting for the 2017 March 15th Legal and Finance Committee. May I have a roll call to determine a quorum? Here. Now is the time for the adoption of agenda. Is there a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Motion made by Steve Laurenti and seconded by Lisa Modrick. Is any discussion? If not, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now is the time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council members present. I have no speaker request forms. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the body? Is that you? Okay. Being no one present to make a comment, we are now ready to address consent items 1 through 15. Now is the time I open the public comment session for items 1 through 15 or the consent calendars. Again, I have no requests to speak. Are there any requests from the audience or staff to discuss issues on items 1 through 15? Go ahead. Okay, when you get there. Thank you. I now close the public comments session as we have no one addressing the issue from the audience on issues 1 through 15 on the consent calendar. Are there any items on the consent calendar that wish to be removed by members of the council?
Item 3.
Item 3. Anything else?
Item 13, 14, and 15.
We have a motion before us to remove 3, 13, 14, and 15. Or withdraw. Do we have a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent calendars, items 1 through 15, less 13, 14, and 15?
So
motion by Councilwoman Modrick and second by Councilman Laurenti that items 1 through 15, less items 3, 13, 14, and 15 are approved. Item number 3. Approve resolution number 2017-012B, a resolution levying assessment for cleanup and miscellaneous property. I'll go to Jeff Barbier as for a comment. Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was some confusion on number 10, Audrey Kuhnhauser. We want to remove that from the assessment roll. There was some confusion about whether she had one bill. She actually had 2. So we'd like to remove that from the assessment roll, and then I've okayed it with the finance department to waive the $100 late fee. So the bill will just be $87, and she will send us a check. I spoke to her this week.
Okay, so the resolution will be brought to us Monday night as amended, as you stated. Okay. Is there a motion from the body to approve it as said? Second by Laurenti, approved by Lisa Modrick. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 13. Item 13 is to authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign a second amended contract for construction of a public improvements through private developer tax increment district number 38 between Heartland Retail Center LLC and the city of Rapid City. And I have a request from Mr. Steve Laurenti to speak. Go ahead, Steve. I have no motion before us yet.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask the city finance officer a question on this, please. Thank you.
You bet. Go ahead.
Pauline, on this particular item, obviously, I've been communicating with you on this one, but so I'm trying to figure out, what I'm ultimately trying to figure out is the, and maybe you replied to me already, and I need to look at that, but trying to narrow down and get the information to all of the councils by Monday night, what we were looking for earlier, which is the TIF costs not related to infrastructure. And I was wondering if there's any way you can speak on that, or I know that there was some concern about the percentage of professional fees as well as to the total TIF. So I was wondering if you had any comment on that or if you have anything to add.
So I haven't looked at the percentage of professional fees that are applied towards the infrastructure. Looking at the spreadsheet that I had quickly, it actually looks like they're lower, or their professional fees in one phase, they're requesting $118,000 roughly, and the total expenses for the project costs are closer to the 1.3 or 1.4 million. So it's about a 10%, which is reasonable in my mind. Phase 1, they have about 187,000 in professional fees that they are requesting. And again, it looks like they're over almost with that 187. So it's about a $1.8 million project cost. So again, right around the 10% range for professional fees.
So were any of those professional fees not related to infrastructure items? Do we have it broken out like we did on the one for TIF 54?
It's not specific to each project item. It just says engineering, design, construction, and admin. That's all that the description gives me at this point. I know Patsy Horton has thoroughly gone through the certifications for TID 38, and we are waiting for some information to come back from the developer before we know what the final certified costs will be. As she is looking through those invoices and what has been submitted at this point, she is looking to see if it's within the TID boundaries, if it's for approved project costs. So anything that's not within the TID boundaries or not for approved project costs will not be included in the certification.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Do I have a motion before us to handle this item number 13?
I'm going to make a motion to send to council without recommendation.
Okay, there's a motion made and seconded on item 13 to send to council without recommendation. Any further discussion? This is on item 13 for those that have just joined us. Item 13. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? For the record, reflect that Councilwoman Scott joined us. Thank you. And anyone who joined the audience that we are on item 13 that walked in. Item number 14 is to authorize Mayor and Finance Officer to sign third assignment agreement for tax increment district number 38 between the City of Rapid City, Heartland Real Estate Center, LLC, and the Core Trust Bank. This is an item continued from March 1st, 2017, Legal and Finance Committee. I'm going to make a motion to. Okay, there's a motion made and second to send item 14 to council without recommendation. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item will go to council without recommendation. Item 15 is to acknowledge the purchase of stage with vision funds for use by Rapid City Summer Nights and authorize Mayor and Finance Officer to sign lease agreement with Rapid City Summer Nights for the use of the stage. That was pulled by Steve. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And if I can, I didn't know if the city attorney wanted to say anything on this particular item, but had short discussion just before the meeting, and I think there were some things that may be changing prior to Monday. So I just wanted to give the city attorney an opportunity just to speak a little bit about that, just so that council's aware of some possibilities in some amendments to the agreement.
Certainly, council, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had set this up as a lease because one of the directives that I had received was that if Summer Nights, for some reason, ceased to use this stage since the taxpayers had paid for it, that the city would be able to retake possession of the stage and use it for community purposes, or at least decide what was going to happen with the stage at that point, since taxpayer money purchased it. Looking at that, came to the conclusion that having the city have title to the stage was probably the easiest and most effective way to secure our interest in it. Really prevents them from putting any liens on it or taking any loans that would impair our ability to repossess the stage. And frankly, it also helps them a little bit because we can license it and things cheaper than they can. You know, the only real issue I think with it, and they will still store it, and other than the license and registration, they will store it, they will maintain it, and they will pay all the costs for upkeep and maintenance. They will also insure it for loss, and they will also cover it under their general commercial liability policy. So really, it'll be like they own it, other than that their name won't be on the title. They did want an opportunity at some point to purchase it, so they would just own it outright. At this point in the agreement is after 5 years. I guess the question I have is whether or not, and I would like some input from all of you, whether that is a sufficient, 5 years is a sufficient time. I would guess, and I'm kind of trying to push, and we've been having discussions, we just don't have it resolved yet, but maybe pushing for a longer lease period, or at least having a city option to repurchase it if they cease to use it for the purposes that they're using it for now, or going to use it for, that we could repurchase it for what they paid for it. And we haven't really settled on that yet. But I would probably be more comfortable at looking at what the amortization on like the taxes would be, and basically doing the lease term so that it corresponded with the amortization, and when it was basically down to zero value for tax purposes, then we could set the lease term at that amount. And I don't think they're necessarily opposed to that, but having a board, we've been trying to negotiate with their attorney representative, and he's been trying to take things back to the board. So I would plan on reaching out to them prior to Monday night and having further discussions about that. So if you have some thoughts on it, I would appreciate it, and I can convey that to the representatives of Summer Nights as we try to finalize this prior to Monday night.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any more to say?
I do.
He still has the floor.
I know I have. Oh.
I'll get to you.
Thank you, Chair. And if possible, I guess I want to ask a question, maybe just put a bug in the finance officer's ear on this particular item, because the city attorney's talked about amortization. I assume that figure would come from the finance office, how we would amortize this, how it would typically be amortized, and how long it would take to bring something like this to zero, if you will, or near that. So I didn't know if, Pauline, if you had any idea how long that would typically be on an item such as this, if you had some input on that.
Thank you, Mr. Alderman Laurenti. Yeah, and I told Joel that typically something like this is probably a 7 to 10 year amortization. With straight line amortization, it would probably be a 10-year.
All right, very good. Thank you. And I guess that would be something I would support, and that they would just take possession of it would be my opinion, in that 7 to 10 year period, given the fact that it would be amortized to zero, and also given as well the contribution that Summer Nights has brought to Rapid City, which has just been an unbelievable bonus for all the citizens of Rapid, because it hasn't cost citizens anything to enjoy the Summer Nights for how many years now. So I would support that for sure. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Next, Councilwoman Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And may I ask City Attorney Joel Ledeen a question, please?
You may certainly do that.
Thank you. So, Joel, I can agree with Alderman Laurenti's sentiment, because he was already, and it's based on your recommendation of extending that lease out until at least the depreciation table is done on the stage. My main question back to you is if we're looking at an option for a 5-year lease to start with, most of the Parks and Rec stuff that we do is 5 years, and it's an automatic renewal or a time to renegotiate it. Is that part of this? You only mentioned a 5-year lease.
Well, that was their initial proposal and draft. That's why it's in there that way now. I guess their concern would be stability and not having the rules changed. I mean, this council right now, you have awarded them or agreed to purchase the stage for their use, and are being liberal with what they can do with it, because their intent is to look at other community organizations and potentially generate some revenue from renting this. So I think what their concern would be is that a council in 5 years says, hey, wait a minute, we'll take possession of the stage, we'll lease it to you for, a couple thousand a night, plus we'll lease it out to all these other groups, and therefore they'll be right back in the position they're in now, where they have a large expense every week for renting a stage, and may not, when I was on the board of Summer Nights, I mean, we had a couple instances where we were renting a stage and there were conflicts and we couldn't get a stage that night. So they want to make sure that they have one priority on the stage. They want to save that cost per week, and they're also looking to generate a little revenue. So, which all would help the event be successful. So their concern is if we revisit the lease in 5 years, a different council may say, hey, wait a minute, we want to go a different direction, and they'd be right back at square one. So I think if they do, they're okay with the lease, with the title being in our name to protect our right to basically repossess the stage if they cease to operate or if they cease having the event. But they want a long-term lease where it kind of secures these terms for them for the duration of, our security interest in it. And then at that point, they would like to, I think, take possession of the stage without any restriction. It's just a question in my mind of how long we have that interest to protect the community's investment in the stage. And I think the amortization is an easy way to justify that.
Yeah, I think I would lean towards that. So if we weren't looking at a 5-year lease with an automatic renewal, kind of like we do the Parks and Recs, then I think we probably need to tie the lease agreement to the amortization of the equipment. So that would make the most sense to me, especially with the discussion that has happened today. So, but thank you.
I'm going to need one. If the chair can ask a question, why are we using a lien on the title versus ownership? Can we, like a bank would do on a vehicle? Could we use a lien versus it having it in our name?
I looked at that. I'll be honest, I'm not a commercial lawyer, so I had to break out my textbook from law school on secured transactions and try to read the UCC. I think there is a way to do it. It would be an unusual situation because normally when you have a lien like that, it's securing a debt, and this isn't really securing a debt. They don't owe us anything. It's just trying to secure an interest in it. My quick perusal of it is that while we could potentially file something that would secure our interest in it, it would not be as secure as just having our name on the title. Some innocent purchaser or somebody could intervene in there, and it could become much more messy if they were to, have financial problems. There's a whole new board, and they do something, sell it to somebody, there's money exchanged, and the purchaser did not realize that we had a security interest filed in it and stuff. And then it gets, under the UCC, it gets much more complicated than just if our name's on the title. If they were to take it to a bank's going to say, where's the city? They're the owner of the stage. If they were to sell it, they can't transfer title without our authorization. So it's the most secure way, and frankly, the easiest way without any complications if something were to happen, just to have our name on the title.
Any other questions or discussions? The motion before us is to acknowledge the purchase of the stage with division funds for the use of Rapid City and authorize the mayor and finance to sign a lease agreement with Rapid City Summer Nights for use of stage. Do I have a motion to that effect?
I'm going to make a motion to approve knowing
I was going to say,
I think it's fine to recommend approval of the lease as long as you're liking the structure, understanding that the only thing that really we're talking about changing is probably the 5 to a different number. So.
motion stand.
We have a motion before
sorry,
us.
there weren't microphones up here. The side conversation was the potential discussion of a friendly amendment to go ahead and change the language now to be the lease that would match the amortization of the piece of equipment, but we can make that motion Monday night based on the city attorney, so we'll just continue with the motion as is right now.
We have the motion before us to send this to council with recommendation approval for further discussion. Okay. Any further? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 16, that's the end of a consent calendar, is an item I've requested, a briefing on street pavement maintenance. If the committee is okay, I'd like to just sit here and listen, because I'm going to ask Dale to brief us on the presentation briefly, and I'll discuss it, and I don't plan on making a big presentation, more for discussion. If that's okay. Thank you. Dale, would you I appreciate what you did here. It's very well done, and without further ado, I'd like you to talk about this, and this is a discussion on where we are on our streets and highways, and where we are for funding for the maintenance, long-term replacement, and so forth, and where we should be. So with that, Dale, would you please proceed?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, city staff put together numbers, if you will, regarding infrastructure, bridges, alleys, roadways. There are a lot of general assumptions involved. This isn't a street-by-street analysis of where we're at. Generally speaking, we lack funding for infrastructure when it comes to our pavements as well as bridges and alleys. If the expectation of the community is to try to fix more streets, additional funding is going to be necessary. This report that was put together kind of just lays out in annual dollars what an increase in maintenance and replacement costs for those types of infrastructures would be. If you go to the last page, I'm assuming everyone had an opportunity to review this item that was linked. I'm sorry, second to the last page, last page, actual funding is about $13 million a year we have on our infrastructure based on the general calculations that we made to have a replacement program for our streets and to try to do a lot better on the condition of our infrastructure. About $38 million a year would be necessary in today's dollars. So the difference between 38 million and 13 million is significant. And I think the assumptions made in the report and the dollar amounts are very reasonable. Alderman Wright requested this information, and I think he may have some comments to add.
Thank you, Dale. And before I say anything, I'd like to have discussion if members of this committee would like to discuss this issue. Steve, I think you're up. Well, Dale, I want to thank you for this report. It's something that we've had somewhat in the past, and I think that all of us on the council and have heard from our constituents that our streets are in terrible shape, some manner, shape, or form. And they want them improved, they want them maintained, they want them repaired. And you brought up a good question to what level of service do we want our streets at? And I think the purpose of my bringing this up is we're in election season. And I'm not running, so I'm sitting there saying I can discuss this without getting shot at, I hope. But that's not the purpose of this. I think that we have a huge investment in our streets alone. And as a community, we should be discussing the reality of what we have versus what we should be doing. And level of service is an engineering term that says if you want a really smooth ride, if you want your coffee to stay in the cup every street that you drive, that kind of stuff, no bumps, it's level A, very high class, and it costs a lot of money. Are we willing to handle chuck holes, potholes, failing streets, stuff that's probably level D or F or some level? I think we need to discuss as a community what level of service do we want. We certainly don't want to get close to the failure stage where we are in a lot of our cases, a lot of our places and streets. So I think the thing that has to happen is when we look at these numbers and we're talking about the infrastructure, and I did a talk with the Engineering Society a while back, and I think we had an estimate of our capital infrastructure, including streets and water, wastewater, of about $1 billion. And our streets are, I think, around 500 million or something. I can't remember the number exactly, but it's a lot of money. And I think as we do with our homes or our businesses, our lives, we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our community that we're elected to represent to oversee the care of that infrastructure. And I think that politics has absolutely interfered with it. I know from my own experience from 2 years ago when I ran, I addressed this very issue, and I said, we have a shortfall in funding, and it cost me a lot of votes, but it was the truth. I think that we as a community need to come to the realization that we have a good city. Our shortfall is not because the staff isn't getting more money or more bang for the buck or any of that. It's just the fact that we have put some huge investment into our community. It has grown. I think that we have failed to acknowledge that the growth in our infrastructure has required us to also grow in our maintenance and replacement program. For instance, Main and St. Joe were built in about 91, 92, somewhere in there. That's 25 years ago. Pavement life is theoretically designed for 20. We hope for 40 and probably plan on 50. So we're halfway there. And then those 2 streets alone, we're half through the life probably. Do we have the money programmed to replace them? And the answer, I bet, is no. So we need to discuss as a community how we're going to manage that. And that's the purpose of this report. How can we fund it? What can we afford? What level of service do we want to go to? Those are all the questions that need to be answered by this community and by this body, not staff. Staff takes the revenue, takes the program, and implements. It's this body that authorizes and funds. We need to work with the state. Can we get more money? Could we possibly get money from gas tax? Is it possible we can get another 1 cent sales tax on the state? That's been discussed. Do we want to look at a street utility? Do we want to increase property taxes? I'm just laying it on the line. How do we want to do it? And we as a community need to discuss that. And we as politicians, we as elected officials, need to put the rubber on the road. Instead of saying we're going to fix infrastructure and do nothing about it, is failure to govern. And I think it's absolutely important that all of us that are elected or will be elected to handle this issue with honesty, and you do that like you do in business. This is what it is. This is how we have to face it. We have issues related to our water and sewer, wastewater. I'm sure with other facilities, our fire stations and so forth, we need a reality check. And there isn't, if this is $23 million short, it isn't because there's $23 million of fat in the budget. That is not there. It better not be there, and I know it's not. We're just short of funding. And the only honest way to get it is to start discussing how can we meet that? What level do we want? What can we afford? And what are you willing to pay? And with that, I'm going to open for discussion to our staff, but I do hope the media picks up on this. This is a story, this is a fact that needs to be brought to our community. What is your infrastructure worth? What is your street system worth? What are we investing? What have we invested? Where are we short? I guarantee you we're short. And how are we as a community going to address it? Because the health of our community is really, really dependent upon the health of our infrastructure. This needs to be citywide. Let it rip through the election season and let it carry forward into the budget season. And in the future, let's hope we do a better job. With that, I'm open for discussion from members of the council. Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And may I ask a question of Mr. Deltek, please?
You certainly may.
Thank you. And thank you for your discussion on at least mentioning some of the funding sources, because that's always been the issue here is whenever we try to take a look at the city budget, when dollars, I mean, we're getting ready to go to priority-based budget, and we'll see if we can free up any dollars and then reprioritize some of those things. But when we talk about infrastructure, and as Alderman Wright mentioned, we have water and sewer infrastructure. Those are basically enterprise funds, though, and so we really need to take a look at the rate study that support maintaining those or expanding those, and keeping those enterprise funds healthy. Mr. Tech, I am getting to my question. My question on the streets and the bridges, which is the document you provided us, and yes, I want to also include my thank you. Thank you. I know it was a lot of work in order to try to get the summary so that we could understand it. So one of the things I've got in here, though, and I was listening to Alderman Wright, and he did not say it, so I'm just asking you. I know the city in the past has always concentrated on redoing roads with city funds and not looking at a special assessment. And it really makes sense for our main arterial roads and, the roads that are used by everybody. But when it comes to local roads, is a one revenue source that could be considered, and I'm not suggesting it, but I just want to make sure we're having a full discussion on all of our revenue sources. Would that include the ability to even look at going back, and even if it's a partial assessment or a full assessment on a local road, of putting it back on the adjoining properties?
Yeah, that most certainly is an option allowed by state statute for us to be able to do that. That's certainly a policy question that the city council would have to address.
Has the city, in your knowledge, has the city ever done a special assessment on a street? I know we do special assessments on sidewalk projects, but has the city ever done one on a street project?
They may have years ago, but in recent times, I would say in the last 20 years, no, I don't believe that to be the case.
Okay, thank you. So Alderman Wright, I appreciate your discussion, but you were asking for input. Again,
great.
I'm not suggesting we start turning around and special assessing everybody for new roads, but if we're going to hold a discussion on revenue sources, that is definitely one of them, so
I agree
thank
with
you.
you. I'm sorry I didn't mention that, but I totally agree with you. Other comments? Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate you bringing this up. It's important to me, and I do believe elections are important. I'm not up for election either, but I will tell you that it's been very difficult because some of us have been wanting to move funds that the taxpayers are already providing to the city to infrastructure. But ultimately, it comes down to votes, and those votes are cast by people who are elected in each of these elections. And that's what we're talking about. So it's important for the taxpayers to know who they're electing. If infrastructure is important to them, they need to call those people who are running for office and ask those very specific questions. Know what kind of support they will give to infrastructure, and how will they fund it? Will they fund it with new sources of taxes by increasing the burden on the taxpayer, or will they elect somebody who is going to make infrastructure a priority with the tax funds that the city is already receiving from the taxpayers? Because there are other sources of taxes that we are already collecting. One of them would be vision funds, and Jerry has talked about that as well. In the last round, we talked about why maybe there wasn't any city any city projects that were presented in the last round. And so I'm hoping that in this next round for 2018 vision funds, that we're going to open that up, because that is a large source of current taxpayers' money that can be used for infrastructure year in and year out. Will it catch us up? Well, it'll catch us up a lot sooner than what we're doing today, which is not really a lot. And I don't think that raising the burden on the taxpayer is the answer. I think we need to prioritize infrastructure by using the taxpayers' current dollars that they're giving to the city, and it's millions of dollars. It's not just a few $100,000, it's millions of dollars. It's a lot of money. And so I'm hoping that in this next election that the voters will find out who these people are that are running for office and ask those hard questions, so that we can move forward here on the council to serve the citizens better. Thank you.
Councilwoman Modrick, please.
Thank you, Chair. So when you're looking at these numbers, and when we bring in the vision funds, because portion of that, half of it can be used for infrastructure, and it's been used to create a lot of well-deserved projects that are tied into the community and serve so many benefits. But when you're out there walking the streets, when you are wanting to become a city council member, the question at virtually every door is, look at my street, how can you fix that street? And we all believe that we can until we get behind this desk and we find out, how few dollars there are. So just on the study that Dale's done, which is really, it really does break it down for anybody and everybody to read and relate to. When we take the 38 from the 13, and we're looking at 25.5 million a year, we've got to either find, fund, or tax. So if you break that down per month, it makes it a little bit better at 2 million, but who's got $2 million in your pocket per month? $70,000 per day. But the reality of those numbers also make it a little bit easier to obtain, because if we are looking at vision funds this year in 2018, last year we had 6.5 to work with. Well, now we're down to about 19 million. So we've lowered it a little bit, and if we can find some other dollars, either through our priority-based budgeting or some reallocating, we ought to be able to hit that number. We're only putting in $13 million a year, and that number was shocking to me even as I came onto the council. I just was amazed when we have 450 miles of roads that we really are only considering $13 million a year on 450 miles of roads. So I am in exact agreement with Councilman Jerry as well as Amanda and Steve that we're in a momentum period right now of catching up from decades of putting aside. And I too agree that with this being the election time in the season, this is the time for those new council members who are going to be elected and come on to serve. They're going to have the same questions when they go to the doors. How are you going to fix my street? Take a look at it outside my front yard. And the reality are these numbers. So now you have a number as you're pounding on the doors to know what the numbers are. It's an advantage to you. I believe as a council we can find that $19 million. I really believe we can. And so we have a lot of work to do, and we're just now opening up our budget season for 2018, and I hope we can make it a top priority. So I appreciate, Jerry, that you brought this forward, and I thank you as well, Dale. And it's going to take the community to open up broadly their minds to also be part of this solution of the problem that we've had now for decades. Thank you.
Dale?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'd like to add a couple of comments. About a year ago, I had the pleasure of traveling to some other communities, two in Colorado, one in Wyoming, and another one here in South Dakota. And this isn't a unique issue for Rapid City. All communities in our size struggle with funding for residential street reconstruction. That's each department had that very, very same issue. So it's not an issue unique to Rapid City. Certainly in our geographical area, there is a funding shortfall for maintaining and reconstructing residential streets.
I will close my comments by saying that the American Society of Civil Engineers, and I don't have the numbers before me, have done repeated infrastructure inventories and have found the nation to be woefully behind on funding their infrastructure. So it's across the nation. And they talk about the impact of that to our society and our ability to compete and produce and to live. So yes, we're like a lot of other communities, and it's an issue nationwide. But we as a community need to address it head on and do what we can to get better and take care of ourselves. With that, I appreciate what staff did. This was great. I appreciate the comments tonight or today from the council representatives. I look forward to more discussion on Monday night, and I hope there's some good press on this, actually wide open press. So thank you. And do I have a motion to send this to council?
Acknowledge.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dale. Item number 17 is introduction and first reading of ordinance number 1670 regarding the supplemental appropriation number 1 for 2017. Do I have a motion? Amanda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I ask, I'd like to make a motion to approve and retain the floor if possible.
Made as approved and seconded by Amanda and seconded by Stephen. Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you. And Pauline, can you just, I looked at this and briefly, this looks like the traditional first appropriation of the year. Can you briefly just put on record what the sources and this is the carryover?
You'll see the carryover from CIP on this that was approved at the last CIP meeting. Other than that, there are some other additional things. There are a few other carryovers. The ones that stuck out to me were the police department, the fire department, and the airport. The police department, that is increasing budget basically for that grant that was approved. I believe was almost a $400,000 grant where they paid 75% and about $75,000 was going to be paid from undesignated cash. That came after the budget was approved, so that's in this supplement. The other is between the airport and the fire department, because the airport used to pay for the ARF personnel and all of that just straight out of their enterprise funds, and ever since we did the MOU, they've come up with a new agreement. Well, the general fund will pay for that, and then we'll bill the airport for those services, much like we do with the police department and the civic center. So that is also reflected in this.
And thank you. And so the next one that is a traditional second appropriation that we'll be seeing probably within the next 60 days, that one is the one that handles any work that was done in 2016 but still needs to be paid in 2017?
Correct. That one hasn't not come. We've seen the encumbrance resolution, but we have not seen the supplemental appropriation ordinance, so that one still does need to come forward. Those obviously are kind of a no-brainer because we've already, made the order, that type of thing. Because of where the sales tax is at, we've asked that other supplements, whether they're carryover or things that they missed, are held off for a while until we know where the sales tax will be for this year. So other than those two, we're not going to be in too big of a hurry to do supplements.
Okay, so thank you, because one of the questions I had was with the sales tax, and even the state is looking to see the reduction in our sales tax of where we're going. So it's nice to hear, and personally, I'd like to thank all the department directors for taking a look at their budgets and recognizing that we need to kind of pick and choose a few of these supplements. So thank you. I yield the floor.
Item 18 is second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6113, an ordinance to amend park use regulations by amending Chapter 12.24 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Made by Councilman Laurenti, seconded by Councilwoman Scott. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 19 is a second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6167, an ordinance narrowing the municipal licensing requirements for ambulances by amending sections 5.16.010 and 5.16020 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Made by Laurenti, seconded by Modrick. Those in favor, any discussion? Moving too fast. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 20, introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6171, an ordinance to update the city's promotion agency for purposes of the municipal gross receipts tax by amending sections 3.18.050, 3.18060, and 3.18040 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. This motion approved by Lisa, seconded by Steve. Any discussion? Amanda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in support, and we'll be voting yes on this, but I had to really dig into this one because the title on this one really doesn't tell anybody what it's about, but basically, if I understand this correctly, and I guess I will direct my question to the finance officer just for confirmation, this has taken what used to be known as the CVB, which was our customer visitor
Bureau.
Yeah, visitor bureau. And they're reforming, and so this is just reallocating those dollars to the new organized.
Joel could probably explain better, but from my understanding and visiting with Joel and previous discussions with Julie Jensen at the CVB, the chamber oversees the CVB currently, and the ordinance currently says that the chamber is our marketing person that gets 25% of the BBB tax. The chamber and the CVB are splitting into two different entities, and the CVB is changing its name. So this basically, because the chamber's not involved anymore, we don't want to give the money to them. We want to give it to the CVB with their new entity name. So that's basically what this does.
And thank you. I think that's a lot clearer than the title on our agenda. So I just wanted everybody to know that, yes, this is not finding a new revenue source, which we were just talking about. This is just reallocating the existing funds that we're going to promote the city of Rapid City from the Visitors Bureau to this new organization that is as our finance officer said, splitting off from the chamber, Rapid City Chamber of Business. So thank you very much. I yield the floor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or discussion? We have a motion before us to approve this, I believe, or not? We do. Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Meeting's over.